team. So because of that, we have to adjust the editor assignments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move. Ishan, are you comfortable taking on the editor assignment for this week? Because I don't want to give it to Nafisa. It's her first week, so she will be confused about how to do it.
Yeah, ma'am, sure.
Okay, great. So I'm switching you to, you will be case study 3. Uh, yeah, okay. So this week you'll be the editor and everyone else will be a contributor. Okay. And Nafisa, you'll understand in a minute what we mean by that. But before I get to that part, I want to start off. Okay, Shyam's here as well. Great. So we're a full house now. Uh, Hi, Shyam, can you hear me? There we go. Hi, Shyam, how are you?
I'm doing, ma'am. How are you?
Good, good. Okay, so Shyam, I was just telling everyone that a couple of people from your team have dropped the course. So it's just going to be, this is the final group now. Um, so, yeah, this is who you'll be working with for the remainder of the course. So we're just moving team editor assignments around a little bit. So Ishan will do this week's, and yeah, and then I think that should be fine. Then for next week, we can discuss it on the next call. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to tell all of you is that I'm so impressed by your team assignment, the case study. I read through it. Very well done. So, really good job to the whole team. And then, of course, especially the two editors for the week, Sadman and Mustafizur. You both done a great job with it. How did you feel? Any initial response before I share my feedback on the assignment? Anything about your experience editing?
No, ma'am, it was not. No.
Yeah, seemed like you all were quite in sync. I know we were a little worried when I first explained it, but I think you all got the hang of it pretty quickly. So, and how was it for all of you working with the team? Did you find it easy to collaborate with each other? Is there anything you feel that we can maybe work on improving for this week?
No, ma'am, there's no issues between us. So,
Yeah. Mustafizur, how are you feeling? What's your sense?
I have no problem. I have
Problem. Okay, you're all being very polite and nice to each other, which is a good thing. But in case because you were the first editors, if there's anything in the process or if you want to give Ishan some advice for this week, please do that. You don't have to do it in front of me, but you can give some advice on how to progress. Um, Okay, so little bit of feedback. I won't normally be giving that much feedback, but I would like to give you a little bit of feedback just so that going into the next case study, you have a sense of certain areas that maybe you can look at. So as I mentioned, I thought you've done a really good job. You engaged with all the primary sources. I could tell you only quoted a few, but you had clearly read through everything. And I think the paper was pretty well structured. You have good topic sentences in there. It comes across. And in fact, I don't know if you've seen, but you all actually have a comment on yours on the gallery. So someone has left a comment on your case study assignment, a very positive one. So I hope one of the team will reply to the person. So please do use that. We'll come to how I want you to use the gallery section as well in some time. So the only little bit of feedback I have is one, we had discussed citations, but I noticed, I don't know if I missed it, but I don't think you ended up putting an actual citation in. So I would encourage you to footnote, wherever you are quoting a primary source. So just make sure that for the next case study, you're adding that. Um, I think that just got missed perhaps. And my other bit of feedback is after reading what you've written, I think you make very strong points, but I just want to call out, I would hesitate a little bit on describing Europeans as a blanket term for all Europeans. So when you say when you say the European colonization looked for natural resources like coffee, tea, and cocoa and tobacco, that's not wrong. But based on your readings from last week, would we describe Europeans as a single entity? Or would you think of, for example, Spanish colonization, Portuguese colonization, British colonization? These are all distinct. They have some features that are similar, but they're not all following the same agenda. Would you all agree? And I'm going to need you all to
Yes.
unmute and participate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like we shouldn't generalize the whole Europe. Like
yeah, don't generalize and don't amalgamate them into a single entity. So
Ah,
I think it comes across what you're trying to say,
okay.
but I wouldn't describe Europeans as a block. And part of the reading from last week was to show you that they aren't all the same. There are features that are absolutely similar for all of them, but that's just a little bit of feedback, something to keep in mind going forward is the terminology we use, being conscious of it, and how we describe it. Is that anyone have thoughts on that? Do you disagree in any way, agree? Mustafizur, you're a bit quiet. You want to tell me what you think?
Mm, I have some
You're
message
not able to
editing.
hear me. Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I am a little bit writing. What are you saying? The fast.
Okay. So I'd rather you all need to engage a little bit. Don't worry about writing it down so much. But what do you think, Mustafizur, in terms of using the word European colonization? We want to nuance that a little bit, right?
Yeah, there are something missing. That you said, say, Spanish colonization and China's and others. I missed it.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
I missed it to write there.
Oh, I was just saying that don't treat Europeans, European explorers, European colonizers as one entity. We want to describe them in terms of their actual empires and not necessarily as a single category. So, whenever you feel that you all are possibly falling into a trap of generalizing something, just pause and ask yourselves, is this really the way, based on what we've been reading, is this how we would describe them? So, not even how they would describe themselves, but how would you, as historians, talk about describing different groups of people? So I want you to all be a little careful about the kind of language you use. Just something to keep in mind. There's nothing wrong with what you've said. I just want us to create a slightly more nuanced argument going forward. Okay. So yeah, that was my feedback on the case study, but I think you all did a fantastic job. So really well done. I also I'm gonna share my screen very quickly. Hopefully it'll work. Nafisa, you will see in the website that you will now have access to, that you should have access to, that there's a tab called Gallery. You would have received a uh, login email for the gallery. So I hope you've set that up. That's really important. When you click through to the gallery, so you all will notice this is your post. You have one comment here. You can reply to the comment. I would urge one of the editors to please reply, engage with people who've engaged with your work. So the what I'd like to draw your attention to is when you go on the sorry, when you go on the gallery, I want all of you, you'll notice people have been commenting. I don't know actually if you have commented or not. If you have, then that's great. If you haven't, I really want all of you to start commenting, reading other people's work. That's part of the participation um, that we expect of you in the program. And I would encourage you all to read and comment on tracks that are not your own. So you all are doing track B, right? Click on, you can filter, go on track A, go on track C, click through and see what, other teams have done in different parts of the world and share comments. It can be very small also. You can just write a short comment, but obviously, the more you engage, the more thoughtful comment you put, the better. It's good for the people who've made the effort to write. So I would encourage all of you to do that throughout the course. Whenever you have time, flip through, see, none of the assignments are that long, and share your feedback. It's nice. You might make friends with people in different parts of the world like that. So reach out to them, use this as a way to connect with others. But please be respectful. And I don't need to tell all of you, you're very respectful, but please be respectful of the work that other people put in. Yeah, so that was just a short thing on the gallery. So I would really encourage all of you to use this. And now I'm going to move to, just going to switch to a short exercise I want all of us to do before I, just a second. You're all able to see my screen, right?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. Okay, so before we dive into the case study, which I hope you all have had a chance to look at this week, so that is case study 3 that we're doing. But before we go into that, this is a short exercise I wanted to do with all of you to help you with these case studies going forward. So, last week we dove into primary sources, case study work without fully taking a step back and understanding what that is. It's also because last week was more of a introductory week. You were not being assessed on anything. So I'm happy to have introduced it in a slightly less overwhelming way. But this week, I just thought we'll begin with this. So, the first thing I wanted to kind of define for all of you, I mentioned it last week, but I think it's helpful to really understand. In your case studies, you're going to be looking at primary sources, right? And we discussed that. So, you went through those. But what is a primary source? So, I've given a little short definition for you here. Primary source is an original first-hand account created either during the time period that is being studied or by someone with direct experience of that period. So, what we mean by that is it's either been created during the time period, means, for example, a diary or a letter that was written at that time would be a primary source, or by someone with direct experience of that period would be something like an autobiography, a memoir. Those are things that were not written at the time, they were written later, but they describe the time from someone who had a first hand experience of that time. Is that kind of clear? Primary source. Any confusion about what would be a primary source?
No.
No. Nafisa, how about you? I know you missed last week's. Is that making sense for you?
A bit. I'm still grasping the concept.
Okay, that's all right. So Nafisa, we work with multiple types of sources as a historian. What we're
Alright.
describing as a primary source is just a source that was created either at the time that we're studying or by someone who had a direct connection, direct experience of that time. Okay. So, for example, what would not be a primary source is if I, Tarika, went and wrote a book, an academic book, or say you all are reading a textbook, right, for one of your courses. that textbook is using a lot of primary source material, but that textbook is not a primary source. That textbook is a secondary source. Okay. However, and we're going to come to this now with today's case study. There are exceptions to that because today's case study, you all are actually looking at an encyclopedia, right? And so, how would an encyclopedia actually qualify as a primary source? Is because that encyclopedia we're studying as a product of that time. It was written in the 1700s. And so we're actually looking at it as a primary source to tell us about how people thought about knowledge production in that era. So if today we authored a textbook, that textbook may not be a primary source today, but 50 years from now, if someone was studying how textbooks were created in 2024, what did it look like? What kind of textbooks were written? Then our textbook would end up being a primary source. Making a little bit of sense, I hope.
Yes.
And okay, great. So I wanted you to understand that because it does affect how you all read these sources and what kind of information we can extract from a source. You can extract much more from a source than what the source is actually saying to you, right? So there's detail in the source that the author may intentionally or unintentionally be sharing with us. And we as historians, I want you to think of yourselves really as detectives looking at a scene and you're looking at evidence and you're trying to extract all the information you can from a piece of evidence, whether or not that evidence was meant to give you all that information. So think of yourselves as, as detectives, as historical investigators. And whenever you approach a source, keep that in mind. So I'm sharing a source evaluation framework that I use personally. It's not something that the course is necessarily asking you all to learn. So you don't have to mug this up or anything. I'm sharing it with you because I think it'll help all of you with the case studies and with how you approach source in general and information in general. Not just what you're studying, but hopefully, we're living in an era where there's misinformation in the news, in daily content that you're consuming, perhaps on social media, that it's important to understand how we're consuming the content we are and what that content is really telling us. So this, you might find this useful in life and not just for this one course that you're doing. So this is an evaluation framework I like to use. What are some of the headers we're looking at? And then we'll dive into this. We're looking at origin, purpose, what is the origin of the source? By that, I mean, who created the source? Who was it written by? Sometimes we have a name. Sometimes we have an organization that's made something. Sometimes we actually don't know. It can be an anonymous source, right? And that itself can often tell us something. Why is it anonymous? Who could it have been written by? The fact that it's anonymous, what does that mean? So these are all questions I want you to think a lot deeper than, Nafisa has written a letter and now we're evaluating that letter. Nafisa has written it, so we should just take it at face value that Nafisa wrote it and this is what it said. I want you to question who, what, why, always with anything that you're looking at. So, who created the source? Easy question for all of you to answer with every source that you look at. When and where was it created? We may not always have this information, but if you do, put it in. And you guys will remember from last week's narrative mapping that context is really important because it'll help us make connections. So, you'll notice that stuff we're doing in case studies is going to be equally relevant in narrative mapping. And all these skills that you're going to build right now, by week 5, week 6, you're going to be acing all of it because you'll know exactly what I mean when I say some of this. So, right now it might feel a little overwhelming, but I don't want you all to stress out. This is just meant to help you. When and where was it created? So context. And what type of source is it? What are we looking at? Are we looking at a photograph? Are we looking at an article? Are we looking at a diary? And the type of source does matter, right? Because was the source created for private or public consumption? Who's the audience? That can affect our reading of the source. It can affect also the way the source was intended to be read. So if if I write something personally in my diary versus how I would write something in an email to all of you, it would be very different, right? So that would really impact the way we think about a source. So origin, purpose, what is the creator trying to convey? The other questions I try to ask of a source is what is it actually saying? What is the source? What are the key details or arguments being presented in it? What kind of information is it not giving us? So, if it's telling us one thing, always ask whose perspective am I actually looking at here? So, for example, um, let's see, Shingam, if you can tell me, um, give me an example of like if a European explorer, something you all saw last week, right? You had if a European explorer is writing about coffee and a native producer of that coffee is writing about coffee, how would that differ? Would it be different?
Yes, obviously, because the writings will have their personal bias. For European, it might be an exported route which they're using to enjoy their lifestyle, having social friends, having coffee over, having party. But for the African, it could be like a father lost his son who was sold as a slave to work on the plantation or exported away for working in the cotton plants. So narratives can differ and it can become one's man's joy into another's man's suffering at the same moment. You can be happy because you got someone to work at your place. At the same time, a family is losing their child. So, yeah.
I could not have put it better myself. That was really well put. Exactly. I think you nailed that. That is the kind of dynamic, and it's a really good example of how exactly what you said, one man's suffering could be, really another man's triumph. And when you're dealing with sources, always think about authorship. Whose perspective are you really reading here? It doesn't mean that if you're reading a historical source, that source is fact, right? It's usually not fact. And what is a fact really? And can we challenge facts based on who produces them and in what context those facts are produced? So just layers of questions that need to be asked with anything you're engaging with. So content, of course, matters. What information is it leaving out? What's not in the frame? What's being, and sometimes with some sources, by the way, you might not be able to answer all these questions, and that's fine. But it's good to ask them because it might really help you develop a key insight or an argument that you may not have thought of otherwise without engaging with it in this deeper way. And always ask how reliable it is. How reliable is the source for your research question? Was it sometimes you have sources that you can tell were produced under pressure, right? Maybe they were produced in extenuating circumstances. Maybe they're not honest for a particular reason, even if the source doesn't say it, maybe from the context of the source and who wrote it, that it may not be an honest account of what they're actually saying. And so you learn to read against the grain of the source a little bit, question the actual content of the source itself. And the last two things, context I already mentioned, but this is slightly expanded context, more in line with what we're really looking to do in this course, which is whenever you're looking at something, look at what's happening in other parts of the world as well, in that historical moment, what is going on, what are the broader, wider forces at play. So if we're looking at a source about, like we were last week, about coffee production, one of the things you guys did really well is connecting that to broader forces about, the growing sort of the rise of colonization, colonial forces at play, how those impacted economic, social, political interactions. So those are broader forces. Obviously the source may not be telling you that, but you all are studying history and you know that it's happening in a certain context, so we must keep those that context in mind when we engage. And the last bit is significance. And this is, of course, important for the actual exercise you all are going to be doing, which is the essay. So, what is the source? Why is the source really important for your question? Is it giving any new insights? How is it deepening our understanding? And so, this is a really useful framework. I will share this with all of you as well. Whenever you're looking at sources for the case studies or otherwise, tomorrow, if you all are reading, I don't know, reading an article in the newspaper or watching a reel on Instagram, you'll be surprised actually if you use this framework on something that you're doing on a daily basis. The results might be really interesting and insightful for you. So I would suggest maybe testing this theory out a little bit and seeing what results you get. So, useful framework, I feel, not mandatory for you to use, but as a team, you're welcome to use this. This is for case study. So, questions about the framework.
Should we use this in our essays, like the origin, also about the significance?
You can use aspects. You don't have to do. So what you do in your notes doesn't have to all your notes will not make their way into your essay, right? So some of the information, so you may not put the entire note that you made about origin or purpose in, but you might realize actually the context is really helping with the research question. So if you do this for each source, and maybe you guys, I'm gonna come to that now, but one way of doing it is you could divide the sources between the team. So each of you do this for one source.
Yeah.
And then for the editor, it becomes really easy to come put everything together because all the notes will be there. Okay, I haven't read the source myself, but Ishan said, okay, this is what it means, this is the origin, purpose, and all. And oh, look, this is how it connects to the research questions. So this becomes a really good way of combining that in the essay. So you're welcome to use this, absolutely. But I'm not saying that you need to do a copy paste of all these answers to all these questions and migrate them into your essay. No, take what's relevant to the question. Ishan, were you going to say something?
No, nothing.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions on this before should I move to the case study?
Ma, is there any way we can relate case study 2 to case study 3?
Is there any way you can what? Sorry?
It's like in case study 2, there was a primary source of
Yeah.
Maria, who was a scientist or researcher. So she had drew the cocoa plant and the cycle of cocoa plant in
Okay.
case study 2. So I guess it was case study 3. Sorry, primary source 3. And in case study 3, we are doing about encyclopedia. So what she did was to show the life cycle of the plant. And in the encyclopedia, there is the pictures and how things came up to be. So
Yes.
if I relate that source of case study 2 to case study 3, although it was not given in the primary source of case study 3,
Yeah.
would it be okay?
It would be fine. You don't have to make those, but I'm very happy to see you making connections across different, you're welcome to use other sources. Just make sure that you cite the source correctly. So if you're using a source, make sure that you put it in a footnote and that you bring the citation in correctly for that source. So don't say the citation would not say case study 2. The citation, if you're able to see my screen, is this. So you would copy paste this into your footnote, okay? Where it says source, that's what I want you to use. Is that fine?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Okay, let's get to the case study now. So, based on what I've just shared with you, I thought, I'm assuming you all have read this, so I'm proceeding accordingly. Um, if you haven't, please do take the time to read through everything properly. But let's look at what the challenge question is. And then I thought we can do one of the primary sources, this origin purpose thing together. So, we have a sense of how to approach it. So, your challenge question for the week. And Nafisa, this is the question you have to, as a group, answer in your essay every week. So, every week there'll be a challenge question, and that comes in the case studies. And you are track B, science, medicine, and global health. You have to, in 750 words, answer this question using only the material on this page. And you are welcome to use other material, but you don't have to. Okay, so your question for this week is, what assumptions underpin the production of the encyclopedia, and how might these have shaped Europe's influence in the world? Okay, so keeping that at the back of your mind, let's first look at this primary source. Let's do one. Yeah, let's do primary source 1, figurative system of human knowledge. And let's apply the framework that I just went over to this. So ignore the challenge question for a second. Let's begin with this. So can anyone tell me the origin of this source? Come on, guys, not that complicated. What is the origin?
Ajam's
Rubaiya, you haven't spoken. Why don't you tell me what the origin is of the source?
এটা কই?
Okay, am I audible? Is there an issue with audio?
Yes, ma'am.
We can hear you.
Okay. Does someone want to jump in with origin? What? Okay, let me pull up. One second. I'll share my full screen so you can see both things at the same time. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm just adjusting this so you can see both things together. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, ma'am. You all have to call me Tariqa. No, ma'am. Okay. Now, origin. Who created the source? Come on.
Encyclopedia.
Yes. It's the Encyclopedia Project, right? When
Yes.
and where was it created? Let's scroll up. All the info is here, right? We already know. So when was it created?
1751.
1751 to 1772.
72 centuries. Yeah.
Perfect. And who has created it?
Denis Diderot.
No, not just Dennis.
And Jean Lee Rohn. Jean Lee Rohn.
Okay, so what I want you to look at here is really also this, right? It's not a single person who's contributed to the encyclopedia. There are 130
Uh,
different contributors.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's what does that mean? Why are we thinking of that? It's not one author, it's many authors, which means that it was a collective effort, right? So when we talk about the source, we can't talk about it solely from the perspective of one person. We're gonna have to think about this as a collective thing. But when we're looking at primary sources, some of these sources are authored by a single person, right? But something like our first source, the one that we're looking at right now, this could be a collective exercise. It could be similar to the way you all are doing the case study, right? When you're posting your case study essay, that's a collective effort. It's not one author only. One of you is taking the lead, but you're all working on it. You're all contributors, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right. What is the context? Where is this happening? Where was the encyclopedia published?
Roman, I hope. Mm,
There's only one nationality popping up everywhere. What is it?
French.
Yes. So it's in France that this has been published. It's a French encyclopedia, right? We now imagine for a second that they didn't use the word French anywhere. You should still be able to tell that it's French because the language of the title is French, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that much, see, you're deducting, right? So you have to deduct based on you have to make that deduction based on what's at hand. Here they've actually said France everywhere, but imagine if we didn't have the paragraph above. Over here, nowhere have they said France in this description. But if I put the source in front of you, you would probably be able to deduce that it is France because of the word encyclopedia, the way it's been spelled. It's in French. Great. Okay, what type of source is it? What is an encyclopedia?
What type of? Mm, reason, memory,
This
imagination. There are three branches.
no,
It's an article.
Of source.
Rubeya, you were saying something, I think?
Sometimes like different.
it's a collection of comparative theory. I don't know how to pronounce that word. It means a small book which has chapter of content dedicated to it. So encyclopedia is the accumulation of that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing it actually. Yeah, I would say that's valid. Um, right.
Yeah.
But let's think about it. So that's more specifically what it is, but let's zoom out a little bit and think about this is obviously not a diary, right? This is not a
Article, right?
it's not a letter, it's not even really. Yeah, it's a series of articles, it's a collection, so it's not a single article. It's 74,000 articles, in fact, they've told us here, across 35 different volumes. But an encyclopedia is really a store of knowledge, right? We're thinking about it as a collection of human knowledge, which at that time, today we think about it very naturally. We have dictionaries, we have textbooks, we have encyclopedias, of course. We're so used to seeing these repositories of knowledge, but at that time it was quite unique. People hadn't really put together something like this before in a collective effort. So it is textual, but it's also visual. As we can see in the case study, there are multiple sources that have visuals, they have drawings. So it's a collection. And is it, let's think about now, because of what it is, what you've described it as, what is it meant for? Like, what is the purpose of this? Why make an encyclopedia? Why have they done this?
Spreading knowledge, free thoughts.
Okay, what else?
To keep all the information in one place, which can be easily accessible to them, so
Yeah.
they don't have to look at scattered places. So when they open the encyclopedia, they could, fast forward to the what already has been discovered, add new things to it, have a record of what has been there.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other?
Wide range of subjects, science, arts, craft, philosophy.
Yes. Yeah, it's covering a very diverse range of topics. What else? What else could be the purpose of making this?
It's mainly reason, logic, science.
Yeah. But let's think a little bit about audience. Why would you make this? Who is consuming this?
Everyone, because the sum of the all human knowledge.
Right. But Mustafizur, who do you mean by everyone? Is uh the slave worker on a plantation in North America consuming this?
So, ma'am, sorry.
Who is consuming this?
The researcher, the upper class people who has.
Yeah.
It's
So think of
fancy.
exactly. So let's think a little bit when you're thinking about this. Also think, okay, they've produced this, but we're not living in the age of the internet, right? Printing presses are there, but I want you to zoom out of just thinking about the document and think in a slightly wider way about historically what's going on. So, who has access to this sort of information, and who is going to be able to consume this sort of information? So, you have to be, for example, literate, right? If you're illiterate, you're not going to be able to consume this. We don't assume in this era, in the 18th century, that people are literate. Majority people are not literate. Um, it's also been written in French. It might get translated, but it also assumes a knowledge of French to be able to consume this, right? So there are a lot of these are things that I want you to start thinking about. That if I'm looking at this and I'm assuming I'm not a French speaker, I don't know if any of you are, I can't understand what is written here. I have a little bit of a sense. Memoir, okay, memory, histoire means history. They've already told us up here that raison is reason. You can maybe make out a little bit some words, but otherwise, if you ask me to read this, I really don't know what I'm reading, right? Now, imagine what this would have looked like to audiences at that time. It would be very similar to how we're looking. Making sense? So, think about some of these questions, which is why I think this evaluation framework really helps, because it makes you ask questions that will come to immediately. And so, who is it for? also, I think, gives us a little bit of a sense of how knowledge production is controlled. So I want you to think, who are the producers of knowledge? Can disenfranchised people produce this kind of knowledge? And the moment you put knowledge in the form of an encyclopedia, what are you doing really? You're enshrining knowledge, you're making this that ultimate repository of knowledge. It's going to become the way knowledge is tested, which means the people who write this, the class and community of people who write this, are also the people who can control what is considered knowledge, right? What qualifies as knowledge.
Well,
And so think about this last line here is really important. European claims of superiority, hierarchy,
and
advancement.
advancement.
These are themes that we're going to really be looking at. We've already been looking at, you're looking at some of those this week as well. Is the moment we come to knowledge production, who controls knowledge production really starts to matter. What do you think? Do you agree?
yes.
Yeah. Is it sparking some thoughts and ideas now?
Ma'am, sorry. Again, was the main audience of knowledge men? Was it men?
Yeah. I think
Considering it was way past, I don't think women had that much education for.
I agree. Absolutely. And one of your sources actually on this is about there's an encyclopedia entry about women. And I think that would be a really interesting one to look at over here. Because it's an entry about women written by men at that time. So it tells us a lot about how men perceived women, what their role was considered in society. There's a lot that we can draw out from a source like this that will tell us a lot about our challenge question, which is what are the assumptions? So when I'm asking you origin, purpose, it really is going to help you answer this. What sort of assumptions are the people who wrote this, the people who are producing the encyclopedia, what was underpinning it that the source is not telling us, right? Nowhere over here, anything that we all have discussed right now is not written on this source. And it's not going to be. In most cases, you're not going to find the answers to your questions in spelled out in the source, but by the source's presence, the way it's been presented, the way you engage with it, you can glean a lot of information out of it. Okay, we still have a few minutes, so why don't we do a little bit of on the same source? Okay, let's talk a little bit about content. What is the source? What is the source? What are we looking at here?
Human knowledge.
No, but first, what is it? What is it? What is this? It's a piece of paper that is an extract from the encyclopedia, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It says so this page from the encyclopedia, and yeah, it's showing us. What is it showing us? They've actually spelled it out for us. What is this?
Organizational structure of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It means it's human brain memory, I guess.
I think it
How
means
our knowledge works, like memory and reason and imagination. We use all of this to convey our thoughts.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It does, but I would qualify you're absolutely right. I would just add a little bit to that sentence and say it's not telling us how knowledge is actually organized. It's telling us how the producers of this encyclopedia think knowledge is organized, right? As a historian, you are not supposed to just believe what they're saying. You're supposed to say, this is what they think it is. You get the difference? So we are not saying, yeah, if the French Enlightenment thinkers have said, this is how knowledge is organized, this must mean this is how knowledge is organized. As historians, what we're trying to see is, this is how French Enlightenment thinkers thought knowledge is organized. So that is the content. That's what they're saying. Why are they organizing it? Sorry, go ahead.
This is their belief, right? It's not like
Exactly.
generalized or
Yeah, it may or may not. You may disagree with it. You might say, actually, I don't think knowledge is organized like this. But as a historian, it's not for you to agree or disagree. It's for you to comment on what they thought. You're trying to understand the French Enlightenment thinkers. You're not passing judgment on whether their thoughts were correct or wrong or valid or not valid. You're trying to understand, oh, this is how the French Enlightenment thinkers were thinking about knowledge. So they thought knowledge is divided into 3 categories. And I just to wrap up actually now, the compass points under each source are also helpful. These are added by the course creators to nudge you, like the questions I've listed here, to nudge you in ways to think about the source. So you don't have to use these, but you'll find them helpful. So always read through them when you're doing your case studies, because you might find some interesting insights here. So just to wrap up, I want to go back to the challenge question. You have This is actually a two-part question. There are two aspects of it that you're answering. The first is, what assumptions underpin the production of the encyclopedia? And we've talked
How
about those
might
already,
this
all
have
from
a
this
shaped
one
an
source.
European trends?
Look at the amount of information you've been able to take out. The second part is, how might these have shaped Europe's influence in the world? So, part one is really your origin, purpose, content is really going to help you answer part one. And part two is going to be more of your context and significance. What was the impact of this? And we just talked about it a little bit about who controls knowledge production, who has access to, so who creates this encyclopedia, who has access to the encyclopedia, and how does that affect how Europe's position as as being in a position of power as knowledge producers. What does that mean? If Europe gets to influence what they think knowledge is, if the French get to decide what knowledge looks like, what does it mean for the rest of the world? What does it mean for, possibly our ancestors in on the Indian subcontinent or like in parts of Asia? What does it really mean for them? Does their understanding of what knowledge is then become secondary? What is the hierarchy of knowledge? So think about some of these questions. I'm actually going to quickly just post this in the chat so you have it. Oh, I'll just copy that. I will share this with you. And yeah, any closing thoughts before I then just quickly wrap up and tell you what you have to do? Any other questions, clarifications?
What do we have to do tomorrow class?
Okay, so this was your case study. And Ishan, you're the editor this week. I think you guys know exactly what needs to be done now. So I'm not going to go into that. Oh, this is not letting me post it. Sorry, just a sec. So case study, again, same system. Thursday evening, I want to see a full draft in the Google Drive. And ideally, the team will so Ishan, you'll post the draft in the drive, And then the team should use Google Drive comments to share their comments and feedback on the drive itself. And then the final draft will be uploaded on Friday. Okay, so same system as last week. That's one. The second thing is during the week, ideally, if you all have time in the middle, read through some of the on the gallery, some of the other case studies that went up last week and put some comments down on other people's work. And finally, for tomorrow is the group session. So that's our town hall meeting. For tomorrow and for this week, really, till Thursday, you all have to read the chapter from the textbook and you need to watch the lectures for the week, which, if I'm not mistaken, are lectures 7 and 8. And so chapter is not as mandatory. I would encourage that you must watch lectures 7 and 8 before class tomorrow. And you'll notice under each video, I hope you all saw my email about this. Under each video, there's a little multiple choice question. It's just one question under each video. You're expected to answer those questions because that's going to form part of your grade. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So for tomorrow, you don't need to submit anything. I just want you all to make sure that you've watched the lectures and done the quiz questions. And in tomorrow's session with everybody, we'll be reviewing the lecture material. So if you have any questions from the lectures, please note them down, ask me tomorrow. So Nafisa, it's a fully interactive session. So you can speak. We're going to be talking through everything, ask your questions, and we're going to be doing another narrative mapping exercise. You guys are welcome to, I've put the narrative mapping sheet on the Google Drive. So you have access to what the keywords are for tomorrow. You can look at them, get familiar with them, but we're going to do 2 or 3 of them together in tomorrow's session. Okay? Where is that clear for you?
Yes, Tarika.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
No, Tarika.
Okay. All right. I'm very excited to see what you all write this week. And yeah,
Tarika, question for you.
go ahead. Yeah.
Uh, I was trying to ask you that as I have already mixed that week 2, there are some videos of that lecture,
Yes.
and there are also at the end MCQ questions. Will those be locked if I don't answer them now?
No, they won't be locked. I in my email I had written as well because you all we as the group for BRAC we all started a bit later than everybody else. We only began from week 3. So week 1 and 2 the lectures need to be watched by week 6. Week 6 is your midway point. So by week 6 you need to watch them and answer those questions. You can do it at your own pace. I just expect on priority that the week we're in, those are the lectures you've definitely watched and done the questions for.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. But by week 6, all of you really should have watched all the lectures from the beginning of the course and answered those questions for the MCQ questions that are there.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I think we're good. If you do have questions, by the way, feel free to ask tomorrow also. I will be with all of you on a call. And we have the WhatsApp group. If you are struggling with something, if you're not sure, you want to clarify something, feel free to message on the group, please. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Have a great week, everyone, and I will see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye. Take care.